in a book called The History of the Han Dynasty. And this was written close to 2,000 years ago. Can I read your line or you want it?
No, you can read it.
So this is a quote. This is, again, written 2,000 years ago about the Karakoram Range in Asia. South of Mount Pishan in the Karakoram Range, we traveled over Mount Greater Headache, Mount Lesser Headache, and the Fever Hill, where all of us developed a fever, turned pallid, felt a headache, and vomited.
This is Edward Whymper, the most famous climber in the Victorian era, from 1876 in the Andes. I found myself flat on my back, incapable of making even the least exertion. We were experiencing our first attack of mountain sickness. We were feverish, had intense headaches, and were unable to satisfy our desire for air. Headache for all three of us was intense and rendered us almost frantic or crazy.
And this is a contemporary of Whymper, Edward Fitzgerald. I was only able to advance 1 or 2 steps at a time, and then I had to stop, panting for breath, my struggles alternating with violent fits of nausea. At times I would fall down, and each time had greater difficulty rising. Blank specks swarmed across my sight. I was like one walking in a dream, so dizzy and sick that the whole mountain seemed whirling about me. As I got lower, I improved.
Sounds like fun, huh? Any of you have any experiences close to the 3 that we wrote about? Sir, would you like to share?
Well, I was up in Telluride, and it's been the first time I'd ever been in that kind of altitude. And I got the headaches, and I didn't know what I had.
Yeah.
And then got to looking into this was in the 90s.
Yeah.
I headaches.
Yeah. Trouble sleeping?
Yes, and
For sure.
very dizzy.
Yeah. Anyone else? So these are the symptoms we've just described of what's called acute mountain sickness or mountain sickness, altitude sickness. Obviously, been around for thousands of years. So what we're going to discover today is, why does this happen? Why do people live at those altitudes and not get sick? And if you're interested in going to altitude, how can you prevent these types of symptoms for you? Because we want to go. We want freedom to be able to climb and to go different places, but we need to have the knowledge and the experience and background to be able to do that. So this topic scientifically is called barotrauma. What does a barometer measure? Right, so baro means any type of trauma due to pressure. And actually, it happens both when you're super high and when you're deep under the water. So this is my daughter, Kate, who just read that. She's a scientific diver, is a geologist, and that's her diving. And if we have time at the end, we certainly can talk about the physiology of what happens there. So this is me. I'm an advanced practice nurse and a nursing professor at Texas State. I was a high school teacher and coach. A couple of my early colleagues I started with in 1995 at St. Stephen's Episcopal School are here. And I then went and changed careers, got into medicine. I was lucky enough to lead a couple of expeditions at altitude, and I had parents entrust their children with me to bring them in the Andes. So I had to know what I was doing. And so I did a bunch of research. So that's me. That's 1996. And that's 19,347 feet. I gave this talk at my school, and I said, why am I smiling? And the answer is because I'm alive. Because I really didn't think I was going to be able to make it. My experience with mountain sickness was that severe. And I did everything to prepare. So there's a lesson there. So I did some research, and this was the first book that I found. His name is Houston, not Houston, even though it looks looks like it's spelled as Houston. And he was a phenomenal human. You could see he lived a very long time. He was a professor at University of Vermont, and a couple of my friends actually in that area heard him speak. He was one of the early pioneers in mountaineering. He was part of 2 expeditions that attempted K2 way back before anybody was climbing any of these 8,000-meter peaks. He also was a naval flight surgeon, and so he did a lot of research looking at the science as to what's going on physiologically at altitude. And so he was a great man, a great pioneer. There are a lot of people doing work in this area. University of Utah has got a mountain program, and there's it's called Wilderness Medicine. Their institute does a lot of research still. So a lot of stuff still going on. So these are objectives for tonight. And again, if we get a chance to get into diving, we can do that, but that's not our main goal today. Now, I don't want to bring it back to chemistry. Anybody interested in going back to chemistry? It's a little while ago. But these are the list of the different basic scientists and laws that we're going to look at. We're not going to get into much in depth, but this is a combination of a little biology and some chemistry. But the most important one right away is Dalton's law. And Dalton's law is the easiest law you're ever going to learn or remember. It's the law of partial pressure. So all Dalton's law you can see says is that the total pressure in an area is the sum of all the partial pressures, right? So the amount of money you have on you right now is the dollar bills. You get it, right? The sum is the equal of its parts. So let's just talk about what this means when we're talking air. What is air pressure? What is air? What is air made of? Can we go to the periodic chart and point to air on the periodic chart? What is it? Nitrogen and oxygen mostly, right? You know, and that's really not true. What is air mostly? It's empty space. Most of air is empty space. We call it the kinetic molecular theory, that these are atoms or molecules or substances, a solid. They don't move. They're very close together and they vibrate. What happens when you give them energy? So they have some kinetic energy, some energy of movement. And what's this now? What state of matter is this? You go and add heat to a solid, it becomes a liquid, right? You still have tight spaces here. Then all of a sudden you give it more energy, and what happens? Those molecules separate from each other, and now we're in a gaseous state. We know this because we know we can compress air, can compress gases. And what are we doing? We're eliminating that empty space, right? We can see that. So air is mostly empty space. The actual molecules are going to be nitrogen and oxygen mostly, okay? Just a couple numbers because we're going to go through a little bit of the physiology, and you can see what actual percentage do you think is oxygen in our atmosphere? 22. About 21%, right? About 21%. So let's do a little bit of math here. So right now, sea level, we're about 1 atmosphere or 760 millimeters of mercury. 21% of that is going to be oxygen. So when you do the math, the partial pressure in millimeters of mercury of oxygen is going to be 159 something. We're going to call it 160. So what does that mean? Everybody, please take a deep breath. Right now, the air in which you're breathing, the partial pressure of oxygen in that air is 160 millimeters of mercury. Good? So what happens? So basic physiology, you breathe that air. Now, this isn't exact medicine. There is some residual volume and other stuff in the lungs that you don't need to worry about. At 160 millimeters of mercury goes all the air sacs of our lungs, which are called alveoli. And it would be Mark in the alveoli, right? I love that name. Love it. Now, alveoli are those tiny little air sacs. You could see a picture there, and that's where another very simple law of science happens, law of diffusion. What is diffusion? Substance moving from high to a low concentration, yeah? And so that's what's happening. Now the number here is, that's the partial pressure of oxygen when the blood comes to your heart through the vena cava going into the right atria. So that's when it's all done. 160 N, diffusion happens in our lungs, equilibrium occurs at 100, and that's what's going on in all of your cells right now. Your arteries breaking down into arterioles, bringing oxygen level of 100 millimeters of mercury cells for energy. So all of you right now, that's what's going on. Going to your brain, going to your fingertips, going to your breathing, all of that, okay? So that's happening. And none of us are experiencing symptoms right now. Talking a little bit too fast, right? So we're all good, and this is good. This is what happens in most people most of the time in their bodies. So what is this whole idea of altitude? Well, the fact is that this graph, and when we go on this graph and we see at about 18,000 feet, the total pressure is half. What's our partial pressure of oxygen?
Is that the 160 number?
Divided by
100.
2, because it's half,
Oh,
right? You guys with me there? So now look what happens with these numbers. So this number right here, that was 160, is now half. My 40 is still the same number coming back to the heart. So now 80 plus 40, what's equilibrium? That diffusion happens, right? And it's going to happen, and that equilibrium is going to be 60 millimeters of mercury instead of 100. Guess what? Our bodies don't like that. That's why we get sick. This is called hypoxia or hypoxemia. Lack of oxygen in our blood. Our brains, our muscles aren't happy. Just like when you exercise, you're doing aerobic work, you're not getting enough oxygen, so what happens? Our body compensates. And this is exactly what our body is going to increase the respiratory rate. Cells are starving for oxygen. Give me more, I want oxygen. We're going to increase our heart rate. Our cells need more. We got to pump, we got to go, and we're going to have peripheral vasodilation. So what relate to being a Telluride, being in the Andes, being in the Himalaya? So these are the classic symptoms of what people feel like at altitude. You could have written this, right, sir? Right? Anybody ever been skiing or anywhere and you felt kind of this stuff? Yeah? So this isn't super uncommon. But let's figure out why. What's going on? And the first part of it is this concept of dehydration. Not a new concept for us, but everybody please, aerobic exercise. What are you doing? And you're getting rid of water vapor, moisture, right? And that's going to get you get dry mouth. Well, that's exactly what happens. Panting every breath, and you're losing all of that water. You're also losing carbon dioxide. So when we exhale, CO2 is also being lost. What's the big deal? Actually, this is a huge deal in medicine because in our bodies, CO2 makes acid, right? CO2 makes acid. It's called the Bohr equation. It's a double equilibrium. You don't care, but basically understand that CO2 makes acid. So if you're getting rid of CO2, you're getting rid of acid. And so we call it respiratory alkalosis. Alkalosis is the opposite of acidosis, right? So this is a way to say basic. You're getting too basic. Now, what's the big deal here? Our bodies maintain a pH, an acid level, between 7.35 and 7.45. Think about that. Very, very, very narrow range. What has to happen in all of our cells based on that pH? Every single chemical reaction that exists in every cell in our body wants to be between 7.35 and 7.45. So when you're out of that, you're sick. you are absolutely sick. And that leads to a lot of these other symptoms as well. Okay? So the bottom line is you get at altitude, not enough oxygen, you breathe more, you get messed up, you get dehydrated, and you get respiratory alkalosis. We good? So what do you do about this? That's my little grandbaby. She just had a little baby brother last week. Hydrate. You're losing water. You got to drink. Any of you guys ever go on a trip and you did some reading? You're going on a trip in Utah. You do some reading. Do they tell you to hydrate? Do they tell you before you go to hydrate? Do they tell you don't drink alcohol because it's a diuretic? It makes you more dehydrated, right? So super important. This is a medicine called Diamox, acetazolamide. It's a little counterintuitive as to how this works. This medicine is what we call a diuretic, which it makes you pee. So you're thinking, raise your hand, pretty dehydrated. Well, this is a medicine, a couple of other things, but it makes you urinate ammonia base. So this helps you get back to your pH of 7.35 to 4.5, right? And so you can use this what we call prophylactically, meaning we could do it to help prevent mountain sickness, and you can take this if you're sick. And again, the idea is if you're not hydrating, you're getting in more trouble, right? Because you're just getting rid of fluid that you don't want to get rid of. And then bottom line is you want to descend. You want to get your butt down. Right? If the pressure's high, that partial pressure of oxygen is going to increase. Every 500 feet you go down, it's going to get more and more and more, and your symptoms are going to start to go away. Does that make sense? All right, so how do we prevent? Anyone ever heard of this term before? Right? So we've heard of acclimatize. What does that mean?
Get used to.
Perfect. It's exactly what it means. So how do we do that? Go slow. Elite climbers can get off a plane and climb 10,000 feet up to get to a height and get down and outrun mountain sickness. I'm looking around. I don't know if you're here. Any of you here? Right? I don't know. Take your time. Take your time. When I was in Ecuador, you fly into Quito. Quito's 9,000 feet. You feel symptoms. Spend a couple days in Quito, and then let's do some more acclimatization. Climb high and sleep low. So this is one of the classic mountaineering adages. And if you've ever seen any of the K2 movies or the Everest movies or any of that stuff, they're always setting up a high camp and coming back down to sleep, right? The Sherpas and the porters and the climbers are bringing a load up to Camp 1, bringing a load up to Camp 2, going down to base camp. And all the time, climb high, stress your body, sleep low, and we'll see what your body does. Take Diamox. So what happens? So why do the people live in the Andes and the people live in the Himalaya and the Karakoram? Why aren't they sick? Why are they living there? Why are the animals, right? It's not just humans, but there are animals that are there as well. And the bottom line is when you stress your body this way, your body reacts by doing some positive things. And the first one is, not to get too technical, erythropoietin is made. You're going to produce more red blood cells. What do red blood cells do? There you go. Is that desired? Absolutely desired. We want to carry oxygen. You look at blood samples of people who live in the Himalaya, live in the Andes, they have higher red blood counts, higher hemoglobin hematocrits than people who do not. Okay? When you are at altitude, you produce more red blood cells. You also have greater absorption of that oxygen, and you have this hypoxia-induced factor is also going to increase. All of these things make it easier for you and your bodies to play. That's it. Much, much easier to play. I mentioned Mexico City here because in 1968, this was actually the first blood doping scandal was in the Mexico City Olympics. Mexico City is how high? I have it written down somewhere, 10,000. It's high, right? And so athletes knew that they were going to be performing at altitude. So they trained at altitude. Pretty smart thing to do, yeah? So they trained at altitude, and the cheaters were in Colorado at 14,000 feet, working, took their own blood, put it in pints, put it in a cooler, the day of the race, and infused their own blood. Again, their own blood, no drugs, but what was going on? That blood had higher red blood count. That blood was doped, if you will, simply by being at altitude. So I know when I came back from Ecuador and I had been at 19.3 and I had been stressed and all that, I went for a run in my neighborhood and I'm like, man, this is good, right? Those hills are nothing. You know, when the month before, I'm like, you know, no, it was great. It wears off pretty quick, right? It's a short high for sure. But that's what those athletes were getting. You know what athletes are doing now? Training at altitude. They're not taking their own blood there. You know what athletes are doing if they can't get to altitude? Therapeutic hypobaric chambers. There's hypobaric masks. What are you doing? You're actually stressing your body so that this happens. And they're doing it without going up high. They're doing it in, you know, it's the opposite of a pressure chamber, if you will, right? It's low pressure there. Okay, any questions on this?
Do the masks work?
You know, I actually read something this week when I was preparing, and they don't know. They were not definitive. Of course, the people who are selling them are going to tell you they work. But something I read today actually said they're really not sure if they work. Again, the masks, certainly the chambers are going to, because that's going to put you under that stress for a long period of time. Great question. Any other questions? Now, altitude sickness will not, it doesn't often kill people. You want to die. It was described to me, and I had it, and it exactly, like having the flu and the worst hangover of your life at the same time. A little bit. So when I was on Cotopaxi, we had done all the right stuff. I'm with high school kids, right? I'm with a couple other leaders. We've got some guides. We're on rope teams on the glacier, and we do everything right. We're climbing high and sleeping low. We're taking Diamox. We're there for 10 days before we get on Cotopaxi. We had prepared. We had gone up to 14, up to 16, slept down. We did it all. We did everything right. I'm on the fastest rope team. We are cranking up the mountain. You're on a rope because it's a glacier. You climb at midnight. So you want to climb before the sun comes out because it softens the glacier. You cross snow bridges that are going to melt once it gets warm enough. And you don't want to what's called post-holing. So anyone who's ever done any, winter snow stuff, post-holing is when your feet are going through. That snowshoes will prevent that. So we're cranking, and all of a sudden it's called Black Rock, Yanasaucha, and I'm there, and I'm like, man, I can't move. And I felt like I had the flu and a hangover, and I'm getting sick, and it's horrible. My buddy, who the picture with, took over my program in Massachusetts when I came here to Austin. He's like, Livsey, we will never do this again. You and I will never be on this mountain again. Let's go. And all I remember from my Ecuadorian on my rope team was, Gringo, vamos, por favor. Right? I mean, and I'm getting pulled up because I'm just collapsing. Now, we were pretty close, so I was able to get up there. You see, I was smiling. It was pretty nice to finally get up there. I felt like I was going to die. I honestly, if I could have crawled into a little hole in the glacier and gone to sleep, I would have done it. That's how bad you feel. That's how bad you feel. I knew once I started getting down that I was going to feel better, and I was able to do that. These are potentially fatal diagnoses. So these two here, what we call HAPE and HACE, the HA is high altitude, and it's either pulmonary or cerebral edema. These are killers. This actually is a picture, a photo taken of a friend of mine in May. He's ice climbing in Chamonix. I asked for how to digitalize my old Ecuador photos from 1996. And this guy responded, dude, why don't you make new memories? I'm like, well, I hear you, man. I hear you. So I'm using his memory here. So high altitude pulmonary edema. Now, when I first started researching this and talking about this in the 90s, when we talked about pulmonary and cerebral edema, the science wasn't there. People said, we don't really know what happens, but it happens. So I surmised, I thought, well, you know what makes sense? If you're at altitude and the outside pressure on your body is less, right? Your systole, your heart is still pumping at that same rate and that same pressure, that you're going to get leakage from your pulmonary cerebral arteries that can cause this edema. So edema is a fancy word for fluid. When we sprain our ankles and it becomes edematous, that's the leakage of fluid, lymph, and different things outside of where it should be, right? So we have three spaces, the intracellular and the vascular, and this is in between that. And so that's what swollen edema, that's what that is, right? So interestingly, and this happens all the time in medicine, so you guys have all read that? And we'll go into I'll go back to that. So this medicine, nifedipine there, so nifedipine is called Procardia. It's a very common antihypertensive. So many people who have high blood pressure are on this medication. What does it do? One of the things it does is it lessens the pulmonary arterial pressure. Doesn't that make sense that it would work for high altitude pulmonary edema? Do you know that's how a lot of medicine works? Is we just don't know and figure it out? You know, the number one selling med in this country is Viagra. You know how Viagra was discovered? So cardiac for that, and also cardiac, it's a nitrate. And nurses would be always taught, do you notice these guys are so happy to see us after we give them nitrates? I wonder if we can do that on purpose. Literally. Same thing is true with selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, all those antidepressant meds. Doctors didn't know that depression was because of serotonin, lack of serotonin, but people were on these meds, they got better. Like, holy, yeah, there it is. Right, that's how some of that stuff happens. All right, so oxygen, we've all seen it. I've got a couple of pictures there. We need to descend. Sometimes it's easier than others. Dexamethasone, I'll talk about that in a minute, and then we'll get to the gamma bag. All right, so this is supplemental oxygen. It's gotten a lot more mobile now, those little portable canisters. You don't have to carry those huge, that we see in the hospital, even though when you're in the Himalaya, they're going to be there. I was lucky enough to guide with the first guide to guide the 7 summits. And so I did 2 trips with him in Montana. His name is Skip Horner. And he tells a story about being on Everest, and he just about walked off the edge of the earth. He couldn't turn his oxygen on. He thought it was on, and he was hypoxic and starting to suffer from haze and started doing stupid stuff. And so supplemental oxygen, it's going to help you. Right? Because that 60 is going to go up, right? Those numbers are going to go up. Descend. There's an easy way to do it and a hard way to do it. What gets people in trouble? This diagram, this photo on the right, why is that? I don't know if I'm looking at any of you in the audience. Why is that? They don't want to turn around. A lot of people have spent a lot of time, energy, and money to get to these high places, and they don't want to fail. And they think turning around is failing. I think that's failing. Don't you? Having to be taken down on a sled? Yeah, that's tough. So you want to turn around when you still can, right? You want to make that decision before it gets to be too bad. This is an X-ray. It's from Wikipedia. These are what are called infiltrates. All that white patchy stuff shouldn't be there. And so that's pulmonary edema. And we give dexamethasone for that. Anyone know what kind of drug dexamethasone is? I know I've got a nurse in the back row, but anyone see it before? It's a what? I heard it. It is, but it's a steroid, right? So steroids are very, very potent anti-inflammatories. Yeah, we use it for a lot of different things. prednisone and salumedrol. There are a lot of different kinds, but dexamethasone, potent. We do it IM. There's one famous scene in, I don't know, Vertical Limit, where they're in anybody see that movie back in the day? So they're in the crevasse, right? Those symptoms, pink, frothy sputum, cough, all of that, and they're fighting over the dex, right? Boom, you get that IM injection. Dexamethasone, phenomenal drug, horrible drug. In the short term, absolutely decreases inflammation. And so all that edema that's causing all that pressure and inflammation is going to be lessened with dexamethasone, okay? And that x-ray is going to look a lot better. So nifedipine, I kind of mentioned this, in that pulmonary arterial hypertension there, it's going to lessen that. It's going to lessen the fluid that's there. Okay, in a minute here. So this is, go ahead.
So what about like taking aspirin to thin your blood to help carry oxygen, or like?
So aspirin is an antiplatelet. It doesn't have any effect on carrying blood. So platelets are for clotting. So it's a good idea. It's a good thought, but it's just not related. I was expecting some questions. One of them was like, well, what about somebody with asthma? Well, again, the problem is not that your breathing is bad. It's there's not enough oxygen in your breathing. So taking an inhaler isn't going to help you. That's going to help you breathe, but it's not a problem with breathing. It's a problem with the air that you're breathing has got a lot less oxygen in it. Is that good? Does that make sense?
Yeah. What about like chewing cocoa leaves? Like they do in
I'm not gonna go there. Yes, and I know people have gone. Yeah, I'll look that up. I know people in Bolivia. That's one thing that they do, and I've had friends that have been in Bolivia, and that's common there. It was not common in Ecuador when I was there. Anybody? Do you know? Any idea? No. But I'll look at that. That's a good question. And if you want, I'll give you my card. I could email you with what that. Yes.
Does someone go through altitude sickness first before they go into paper?
Usually for sure.
What's the key thing when you know they've gone from altitude sickness to sudden?
So let's go back. That's a great question here. So let's go back to these shortness of breath, cough. Usually with altitude, we're not coughing. I don't know why it's not on there. Pink frothy sputum.
Okay.
So that is something when you're coughing and it's different. You see these movies, they're coughing all the time at base camp. They've all got HAPE.
Because 3 of those are the same symptoms as
Good point.
sickness, right?
Good point. And that fatigue, the fatigue is when you've got altitude sickness, it's like you don't want to take that next step. When you've got HAPE, you don't want to get out of the tent, right? So it's a more serious, it's kind of like COVID, that fatigue. I just got COVID in April for the first time, and I didn't want to do anything, right? It was just quite fatiguing. That's an excellent question. Let's go to the high altitude cerebral edema. And, a lot of people die from this simply from being stupid. So there are a lot of people that get off a summit and get in their tent and they've got haze. So they've got these symptoms, altered mental status, fatigue, ataxia. They can't control their coordination, severe headache, and they want to boil a hot drink. So they get in their tent, they zip it up, they light their whisper light, their MSR, whatever they've got, and they die of carbon monoxide poisoning. Now, every mountaineer knows you don't cook in your tent, but you're not yourself. We actually, and with hypothermia, we say people turn it to DIC, D-I-C. They're disoriented, they're irritable and combative. Yeah, those are bad signs. That's not going to happen typically when you're just with mountain sickness there, right? But a lot of it is that decision making with that edema there. So let's say you're in that situation and you're in big trouble and nothing has worked. We're going to pressurize you if we can't get you down. So this is called a Gamov bag. A Russian scientist, Dr. Gamov. And Kate, I'm going to show you a quick little video. Himalayas, just so you can see. So what this is a portable pressure chamber. Yep, and you can big screen it.
I can turn that up if you need it.
So I'm going to take advantage of the rest day. We're going to do a little bit of an educational demonstration. This is a Gamma bag. where Russian scientists in Camel and says it's portable recompression chambers that you are feeling really safe and cannot get down.
You're not going to carry that on your back, but if you're on a big expedition,
Shut. And there's a footpath
oh, thank you.
that repressurizes the whole thing to a place that you're most very comfortable with. Now, the fun part is that I'm going to end up in a sausage, and Steve here will end up doing the whole thing for the next minutes. Let's do it.
So again, you can't mount a rescue necessarily. You don't have the resources for that. It takes time. How high are you? You can get this up with a smaller team pretty quickly to help stabilize somebody with either hip or haste.
Okay, now I'm going down at 14 meters per minute. So as you can see, the bag is pretty stiff right now. That's the foot notch. And that's me here. Wow, the pressure on the ears is pretty good. Yeah. I'm down to 3,770 meters.
Right, so he
Wow.
just went down
Really gotta keep
5,000
going.
feet
Let's
just
take
by
me down
being
to
in that
the-
bag, right? It's pretty cool. Saved many, many lives.
Yeah, wow, this is really stiff. Keep feeling a little bit tired at the moment.
So what's going on? The air in which he's going to be breathing now is going to have a higher percentage of oxygen.
Steve, pay the man.
So that diffusion is going to happen at a much higher level.
Wow, my ears are quite squeezed right now. It's not bothering me. I can definitely feel the pressure. It's quite spectacular, actually.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Do you know what pressure is what pressure it is inside when they?
I would imagine that they're trying to get it to 2 or 3 quickly, 2 or 3 atmospheres, I would think, just like you're diving, just to get that initial, oxygen level back up. He was at 3,000 feet, so he still wasn't at 1 atmosphere, right? So he was still higher than that. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns?
How long can you stay in there?
So again, you can get oxygen in there, just air. You don't have to get oxygen in there. Remember where you are. And so you can stay in that for forever if you're getting oxygen in there. And the idea is you get in there until your symptoms dissipate enough that you can get your butt down the mountain. Yeah, good question.
So
Yeah.
somebody has to keep continuously pumping air in while they're in there.
It's pretty tight. I don't know if they're, how those seams are. I would imagine they would be pretty sealed, that you wouldn't be losing
How
pressure.
do you get fresh oxygen in there?
I think if you look at it, that's a relief valve. I don't know.
Just having that.
I wonder
amount
if
of
it's some
oxygen in that
pressure.
space is quite-
It's quite what?
Just that the amount of oxygen in that tube is quite a bit.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't know what the volume would be, but yeah, that's a good question. I don't know how
wonder
long.
if it's some pressure, it starts, just the relief valve opens on its own.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah, you don't want the opposite problems happening, which is the diving stuff. Good, excellent question. What else?
Lou, so I was familiar with how hydration and oxygen affects altitude sickness, but I was kind of curious about diet because I wasn't aware of what were we referring to alkalinity before? Or,
Yeah.
So different food, like when we backpack or whatever, sometimes we eat garbage food, just different food, and it can change maybe your alkalinity.
A little bit. So that's another excellent question, because when you're exerting yourself, you need massive calories. So when I'm doing winter stuff, when I did winter stuff, I mean, we put butter in our oatmeal because we needed fat. You need fat, because you just can't burn enough calories to keep your body warm. So you are dealing with that because everywhere where there's altitude, typically it's pretty cold, right? Now, obviously in the summer in the Rockies, you'd have less of that, but you do need that calorie stuff. I believe that you really don't want for altitude a super high fat.
Yeah, that's what
Diet.
I've heard.
Yeah.
High fat.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we crave that, or you're
Yeah.
you crave like sausage.
Yeah. And I think the idea is that there's so many other things that can help you that's not a high priority. And here's one of the things that's really interesting. We can't predict who's going to have altitude sickness. We don't know. You could be super fit. My wife and I went climbing before we had kids. We went out west for the first time and we were on the Grand Teton. And my wife was a track athlete. I was a football player. No more need to be said. She was fit. She got sick as a dog. We're up on the saddle between the Grand and Mid Teton, and she couldn't go. Also, altitude, 14,000 feet is not equal all over the world. 14,000 feet in the Rockies, people behave differently than 14,000 feet in the Andes and 14,000 feet in the Himalaya. And so it's not in, one of my I had two kind of mentor climbing partners. One was Peter in Chamonix. The other is Michael, who climbed Amed Dablam in November. So he climbed an 8,000 meter peak. And he's like, being in Ecuador and being in Himalaya were not compatible. You don't know when it's going to happen. The idea is try to get everything in your favor and do the best that you can to be prepared, to be fit, and to eat right, avoid alcohol, be hydrated before you go in to give yourself the best chance of succeeding. And again, I did everything right and I got very sick. 19.3, it's not that high. It's pretty high. But I was pretty sick. And again, I had been absolute cranking throughout the entire 10 days beforehand. And we climbed a number of peaks. It just happened. It just happened. Would it happen again? I don't know. It's a good question. Yes.
These medications you're talking about, are they prescription?
They are prescription. Great point. Go to your family doctor. They are not going to have a problem giving you acetazolamide Diamox, right? Anybody, you guys ever take it when you went out west to Colorado or anywhere, New Mexico or anywhere? Kate, have you taken it?
Diamox?
Yeah.
It was given to me, but I didn't take it.
It's pretty easy. It's not, it's not a drug you can abuse. Doctors would have no problems giving it. I don't know about the Procardia, which is the nifedipine for that pulmonary edema. I'm not sure about that. Certainly dexamethasone, absolutely prescription steroid. Yeah, for sure. And again, you want to take that IM. You just want to get it into that body pretty quickly. Yep, good. What else? What kind of plans do you have? I know Sal and I were talking. He's going to Utah, going to take a course. Any of y'all interested in getting high?
Maybe Grand Teton in a few weeks.
Yeah. Are you a rock climber?
Yeah.
Good, great. Beautiful mountain.
I've done it before.
Oh, you have, yeah. The Owen Spalding route. It's kind of the classic route. Not a hard climb, really hard rappel. Getting off it is much harder than getting up it, right? You've done it before? Yeah. Yes, sir.
We're looking at honeymoon destinations, Inca Trail or Patagonia.
Phenomenal. Yeah, excellent. And just get yourself ready and talk to your doctor about Diamox. I think that would be, among other things, you have to get your shots, right? When you go international, you got to make sure you get your malaria and all of that. Good. Anyone else?
I'm just going to travel in Bhutan. I mean, there's going to be a lot of walking and sun hiking, and I'm just trying to figure out if it's even a concern.
How high is Bhutan? I'm not familiar.
Well, apparently the passes are like 13,000.
Okay.
But we won't stay at 13,000.
Yeah.
But on the Facebook group, people are saying, don't forget to get your altitude meds. So obviously some people are feeling it.
Yeah.
But I'm sort of not concerned, but I'm here sort of to find
Yeah,
out.
drink.
I'm not doing climbing.
Yeah, just hydrate like crazy.
I mean, is there kind of an altitude where it becomes problematic?
There are
or-
people that have it at 7,000, 10, 12, 6. Honestly, it's really bizarre. I've actually argued with folks. A friend of mine was on Kilimanjaro, and he said, yeah, I got pulmonary edema at 12,000 feet. I'm like, you can't get pulmonary. Well, he did. You know, you can't argue with experience. So, yeah, you can have all of this, and some people never experience it. Right? So anybody see the 14 Peaks movie, PIMS? Right? So when Michael finished climbing, my buddy, he actually had dinner with PIMS that the night after he climbed. Dude doesn't need oxygen. He is a physiological freak. No other way to put it. His VO2 max is, double Lance Armstrong's ever was. Right? He is just physiologically, he doesn't need it. Certain people at Veasters and different people don't need it. They're going to carry, and I mean oxygen at high altitude. And other people are super experienced, super fit, and they need it. They can't get up without it. So, you never know, and so you just be prepared. Do your best to be prepared. Yes, sir.
So when people climb the 14ers in Colorado, do they ever carry canisters of oxygen even for that?
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen that. Have you?
The small little oxygen cans that you get at the ski shops. Everyone's got them up there now.
What's your opinion on those?
They're in the shops.
I've seen those before, just the little can of oxygen. Does that do anything, or is that just a quick hit?
The only reason why I would carry it is if I was going to die. And if I'm in Colorado, I'm not going to die, right? That's to me, because they're not going to last very long. They're going to make you feel better, but it's not about feeling better, right? If we're climbing, we know we're not there to feel better, right? Climbing sucks. It hurts. It's hard. That's why we do it. Part of it, right? Gets us to places that other people don't get to see, but it's not easy. And I don't think making it easy is the answer, for sure. Yes.
You mentioned VO2 max. Is there a relationship between VO2 max and someone's need for supplemental oxygen?
Yes. Not necessarily to altitude sickness or pulmonary cerebral edema, but absolutely to the need for oxygen. Yes. Yeah.
What is that?
I don't know. I don't know what that number is. Yeah. But for sure, and that's something that you could certainly improve upon. Right. And for those of you who aren't scientific, don't know what that is, it basically is looking at your respiratory and your ability to take in oxygen and use it. The elite athletes like Lance Armstrong and, these folks that are, I can still talk about him, Austin, right?
Yeah.
Their lung capacity is fantastic. It's a way to look at lung capacity. And very interesting, the science behind PIMS, who did, for those of you who don't know, he climbed all 14 8,000 meter peaks in 1 calendar year. And he climbed K2, the hardest climb there is in the world, drunk. Am I wrong? Right? Saw the show. Yeah, he's not a regular human for sure. Well, thank you. Questions? Any other questions?
I'm gonna check to see if there's any here.
And I've got some cards if anyone does want to send me an email about something. Any of you want to talk a little bit about diving? You interested in that? What happens the opposite of pressure? No, that's good. I appreciate your honesty. Right? I had my plant in the audience if that's what you wanted to do. Basically it's the opposite that happens with diving. And it's not an oxygen problem, it's a nitrogen problem. And so nitrogen has a narcotic effect. It's called nitrogen narcosis. And I'll finish by telling you a tough story. So when I started guiding, I took a wilderness first responder course. So it was a place up in New Hampshire called Solo. Great school, very early in the wilderness medicine ethic, if you will. And there were some guys who were there that were military, and they were training because they were going to dive to build a bridge. A lot of bridge building is underwater. So there were these 5 guys, and they're there for a couple of weeks. And on Friday, they're like, let's go out tonight. Come on, let's go. And they're like, hey, what we can do? We could go in the pressure chamber, and we can get narked. We can dial up that pressure and get nitrogen narcosis. We'll have no hangover. don't have to spend any money. So they brought in a card table and they're playing cards. And Monday, they're all in there dead. So part of the problem with narcotics, is you get stupid and they forgot that they were going to end up in time is a huge part for divers, right? Who's been diving? Like that watch is super important. You can't stay down very long because of that narcotic effect. So I'll leave you with that happy note.
There's like a change in atmosphere every 30 feet or 30 meters.
10 meters.
10 meters.
30 feet.
Yeah. So it's like
1 atmosphere, 2 atmospheres, 3 atmospheres. And the oxygen is good, but that nitrogen level gets double, triple. Yes.
You mentioned that atmosphere in the first half of this as well. Is it different above water?
So right
Those
now,
numbers?
yeah. So right now at sea level, the atmospheric pressure is 1 atmosphere. So that's 760 millimeters of mercury. And then that graph that I showed shows how it changes when you go high. And what's the reason for that? Well, if you think about what air pressure is the pressure of those molecules, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, hitting us. Right now, we are being pummeled with billions and billions and billions and billions of these molecules, and they exert a pressure. As you go up, there are less of those, right? If you think about if you're laying underneath a whole lot of blankets, all of those blankets are putting a pressure on you. If you're on top of those blankets, it's not happening. So as I'm climbing up that mountain and getting up to 10 and 12 and 18,000 feet, the pressure is half from those molecules hitting me, much more empty space, right? Much more empty space. So that's how that goes. Yeah. Yes, sir.
It seems like you'd want to spike a saline bag. Do people do that?
You know, it's not really about carrying the oxygen in your blood. So what that saline would do would help your blood volume and maybe help carry that red blood cells. But it's not about that. It's about the red blood cells themselves. There's not enough oxygen for them to glom onto, and then it's not being dissociated at the same rate it would be normally. Yeah, so that's a great point. You know, Dan's a retired fireman and has been on a lot of rescues. First thing we do is, we tank them up, right? When we got anybody in trouble, you stick them and you hang a leader because you want to tank them up. Probably not going to help us here. Yeah, it's a great question. All right, I'm going to be here for as long as people have questions. I've got some cards if you want to send me an email with something, and I'll look at that, see what kind of science there is behind those cacao, right?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I was just curious, but also like, alkalinity is kind of a new thing for me that I just learned tonight. A lot of times when we're doing active things, we try to eat potassium, bananas, or even avocados, but those can affect your kidney and can affect the way that your body processes things. So I'm curious about that.
So it'd have to be, you can't eat enough potassium to get hyperkalemic. You can't. I could give you a bag spiked with potassium, that'll kill you. Right? But you can't eat enough potassium to get hyperkalemic.
But the fact that it can change your sensitivity, I don't know. That's what I'd like to see.
I think if you're looking at the perfect world, that might. I think that's really kind of small potatoes compared to. Alkalosis is pretty complicated because we have a lot of ways that we deal with our acid base level with the respiratory, and so it's fairly complicated medicine.
Thank you for your time.
Oh, appreciate it. Thank you.
We've got some giveaway items. So the other ones are under the table there. So we're going to draw some numbers here for some things. They're not directly related to altitude in any way. They're just fun things. Just fun stuff. So, I wish. That'd be cool. Right. Let's put this under here. So, how many people are here? Because we might have literally one thing for everybody. But I'm just curious. What's the count? 13? That's enough. Yeah, we have one for everybody, so you're all going to get something, but it's just a matter of what, I guess. So we should have 8 things here, 5 things there, so we should be good. Okay. So let's draw one. First thing is Sweet Night Gem from Night Eyes. It's a little, I don't know, light bulb in a way that you can like throw in your cooler or your duffel bag when you're out camping and it lights up. So it's great for at nighttime when you want to see inside your cooler. That's usually what people use them for. You could set it on your table at camp if you want to light it up, and these change colors. So kind of fun for your little camping trip.
Okay, 1183756.
Woo, Troy! All right. And just so you know, if you guys came in late, we do have some coupons here. We have some coupons to our store that you're welcome to use at a later date. We are closed now, so unfortunately, we probably can't check you out. But you can use that on our website as well. So if you guys haven't gotten one of those, be sure to get one before you leave. All right, next we do have 5 of these Deuter tote bags. So we've got 2 or 3 colors. So you can take your pick if you win one of these.
1183760.
Yay. All right. Do you want black, green, or red?
Red.
Red. Okay, cool. There you go.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Let's do this one next. So everything in here is from Night Eyes, but so the next one is an S-beaner pack. These are 3 different S-shaped carabiners that lock as well. So they're very helpful for little things, especially at camp or, you know.
1183764.
Woohoo! All right.
Thanks.
Sweet. Okay, another one of the Deuter bags.
1183762.
Woo! Woo! Do you want black or green?
Black.
Black. I'll toss it there.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next is this super sweet slap lit. It's a koozie for your drinks. They're great at camp. I have 3 of these. I bring them every time. They light up kind of like a wristband when you're running. So it's great so you don't knock over your drink in the middle of the night.
1183757.
Woo! All right. Okay, another Deuter bag.
1183761.
Do you want green or black?
Black.
Oh,
That one.
this one was technically you, but
Gotcha.
yeah. Green. There we go.
Thank you.
All right, next is a headlamp from Night Eyes. This one is 280 lumens. Runs off 3 AA batteries, or AAA, sorry.
1183763.
Woohoo!
6'5".
There you go. All right, another Deuter bag.
1183758.
Woohoo! Do you want green or black?
Green, please.
Green. We also have some Deuter. Oh, thanks. We also have some Deuter no-sew patches. These are great for patching up your gear or your jackets. So we'll throw some of these out on the table as well if you guys are interested in those. All right, next from Night Eyes is this gear line. It is a bunch of those S-beaners, but they're on a little daisy chain. So this is great to hang up a whole bunch of stuff at camp as well.
1183759.
Whoa, got it.
Yeah. All right.
Jackpot.
Yeah. This one's
Thank you.
great for car camping or van life.
Awesome.
Really sweet. Oh yeah, this one. One more Deuter, and then it's the rest of the Night Eyes stuff.
1183765.
Woo! You get one choice here. Sorry.
Thank you.
All right. Next is the Steely car mount for your phone from Night Eyes. This one's really sweet. I have this, and it's perfect.
1183767.
Woo!
All right. Okay, it's your turn.
All right. Next from Night Eyes is the dual cam jam. If you have a truck or a rooftop cargo holder down when you are on the road.
1183766.
These should be you.
Yeah. And one last thing, if you are interested, is a frisbee.
Anybody want a
Just a
frisbee?
big thing. It's the Flash Flight from Night Eyes. Also lights up in different colors.
1183768.
Yeah. All right.
My dog will love it.
Yes. Oh, perfect. Yeah.
It won't last long, but
Awesome. Well, thank you all again so much for
Thanks
coming.
so much, everybody.
And we've got those coupons up here. And again, if you are interested in any of those patches for your gear, we've got those right here, as well as a whole bunch of other fun stuff up here from Whole Earth. So everything on the table.
Editorial note.
Everything's free on the table.
Mims.
Oh yeah.
Climb the 14 peaks, not Pims.
Oh yeah.
That's an alcoholic drink.
Mims.
It's on my mind. It's Mims. My son texted me to make sure I corrected that.
It's a great movie if you guys haven't seen it. 14 Peaks, 14 Summits. I can't remember the name of it.
Okay.
It's kind of, no, it's Peaks. I think it's 14 Peaks.
Has he been hiking?
We can ask him. But yeah, that sounds good. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. Yeah, we appreciate you coming.
Your wives
We had lots of, just a steady stream of people.
So
Somebody signed up.
it's
Oh, Woods. Yeah, we know who that is. Yeah, but his name is Wood.
I don't know if he's
Not
concerned.
Woods. But we know who the Elijah Woods is. The
Oh, well,
person.
I don't.
Yeah, it's someone local here who I think is a customer, and they always get. It's been a thing before.
Well, thank you. This was great. Mark's really knowledgeable.
Oh yeah, if there's enough interest, we might do another one with the diving situation. Although we don't particularly sell anything for diving.
We used
But,
to sell diving watches.
oh yeah, that is true. Yeah, we did.
You might want to look into it.
I remember
Get out,
selling
this
it.
was gonna be part of the lecture series.
Yeah. Well, he asked me, he was like, should I cover any of that? And I was like, I don't think so, but if there's enough interest, maybe we'll do another presentation just on the diving book. That'd be really cool to hear from his daughter too.
You know, she got to make sure.
Okay, I can stop managing now.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, please
And I
don't
gotta-
lose this whole video.
I gotta turn this one off. Thank you guys so much for watching. We appreciate you being here, and have a good night.